is 3 o'clock, and I am so excited to have John Gleason with MS Hatch Consulting. I don't know, but for us in the stormwater world, John is like a rock star. Okay, he is like the trainer of trainers. We all hope to live up to John someday. And John is going to be talking about RUSLE and RUSLE. There's different people that love RUSLE, and there's other people that hate RUSLE. Hopefully, if you John will bring some understanding a little bit more about how RUSLE is working out in the construction general permit. So I am really looking forward to hearing him talk about this. So I'm going to give him all the time possible. So John, would you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, who you work for, and then the hour is all yours.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. And I guess it's might even be later for some than me. I'm in California, obviously. So I'm John Gleason. I'm a professional engineer and a qualified sweepy developer and qualified stormwater pollution prevention plan practitioner. I love those words, QSP, QSD, but also a trainer of record for those. I'm a certified professional in erosion and sediment control, and I also am an approved trainer for those guys. And I'm a QISP for the industrial permit and a trainer of record there as well. So I've got a lot of experience dating back to the 90s. I guess that puts an age on me. When I did start working in stormwater, mostly for Caltrans, and we developed their 24-hour training program back in the day before there was QSPs, QSDs. And then I went to did a lot of inspections for them and helped them write their guidance manuals and their sweepy template and all of their trainings. They got a whole bunch of different trainings, and then we did their training statewide, and then we did uh, the QSP training for them statewide, and then we did the CPES training, on and on. Anyway, done a lot of training, very familiar with things. But what I did about a couple of years ago during the COVID was Caltrans and I got together with the Cal State University of Sacramento, and we used a class to develop an application for RUSLE. And so the RUSLE application that we have here was developed originally by the class that I'm a Vikings fan, by the way. The During their class, it was an actual classroom assignment, and then we selected the best one. Well, that's kind of morphed a little since then, but that was the original thing that happened. So I work for a company, it's a very small company, MS Hatch Consulting. We're based out of Irvine. Work mostly out of our home offices, but we get together on a monthly basis, week or more, and we have an office in San Diego and up in Gaviota, and even a presence up in the Bay Area. And so some of us are up in Long Beach. At least 4 or 5 of us are down San Diego area. I'd say most of us are in the Orange County area. Like me, I'm in Costa Mesa. Okay. We specialize in air permitting and compliance. And when I came on board almost 5 years ago, we added stormwater. And so do a lot of stormwater. I also do remediation regulations for mostly Navy remediation projects, but other CERCLA projects for Superfund cleanups and things like that. So today, I'll do a quick introduction, and then I'll actually take you online and we'll do a demonstration. I put it, I put the link on chat so you guys can actually go and do this with me. And then I also have to talk about the notice of termination. So under the construction general permit for stormwater discharges in California, we have to do a notice of intent that basically certifies that you understand the requirements and intend to comply. So you're notifying them of your intent to comply, basically. And then, of course, they have fees and all kinds of other requirements for that. But until you submit your notice of termination, you're still covered by the permit. So what are those requirements? Well, one of the things you have to do is meet final stabilization. So construction is soil disturbance. And when you disturb the soil, then they want you to stabilize it when you're done. Okay, so how do we do that? There's a few different ways, but one of the things that we did was uh, to um, demonstrate that you've met the 70% uniform background vegetative cover or equivalent. Uh, it takes a long time. And so the rationale is that in California, since it doesn't rain, it doesn't rain at all during a certain part of the year. We call that the non-rainy season, and there still is one, even though the permit doesn't actually recognize it. There is a non-rainy season. Okay, so when it's not raining, it's really hard to get vegetative cover. So what the permit said is that you could demonstrate that your post-construction erosion is less than or equal to the pre-construction erosion using RUSLE or Russell 2. Russell is an equation, they call it the revised universal soil loss equation. It's a Russell 2 is a computer program that can do the same thing, and maybe it's a little more sophisticated to do other things, but for comparing pre-construction to post-construction, they basically are doing the same thing. Okay, so there was some problems with Russell 2. And so this application is not Russell 2. It's because there was limited acceptance by the water boards, the regional water quality control boards in California um, are the ones who review the notice of termination, and they it's kind of a black box. They couldn't see what they wanted. I think they were just unfamiliar with it. And the program for Russell 2 is a bit glitchy and hard to use. And so it wasn't as transparent as they wanted. They wanted it to uh, be very forthcoming and show exactly what was there. And so we were getting some pushback from the water boards. And so the idea then became, well, let's um, let's work with this local school who asked Caltrans if they had any uh, projects that they needed an application for. So this class was just I don't know, maybe 30 people or something like that that had to develop an application, and their grade was based on following our specs for it. And anyway, we worked with them. They would meet at night online, and every now and again we would meet with them and go over their drafts or whatever, and try to tell them what Russell the equation was and how um, to make this thing work. Anyway, then we selected the best application that was developed by these folks when they were in school. Well, then since then they lost their website. I was going to present this at Pasqua, but they didn't get it back up and running until really recently. So this is the first uh, presentation that we've had on for this. We didn't get it into Pasqua, so but I thought it was worthwhile, and I thought this was a great tool for folks to actually use that want to compare pre and post construction for notice termination. Well, the actual developer now is Ryan Bonomo. He actually was one of the students in the class that developed this app. and then he had to take it on his own and redo it and make some changes. We actually had this application reviewed by folks at Caltrans and some from in the industry to incorporate some of their comments and make sure things were working. And so now I think it's actually working pretty well. And so I'm going to go through that with you. Ryan is actually looking for sponsors. He thinks this is something that would be better on a somebody's website that would want to advertise using it. Um, so um, the other thing he thinks that people clicking on it is worth something, you know. So anyway, if you want to get his contact information from me, I think you'll see it's a great tool, and it'd be good to have something like that on yours. Anyway, let's go through RUSLE just briefly before we get into the application. So the revised universal soil loss equation is A is the actual erosion, sheet and rill erosion. Soil loss is the same as erosion. Okay, so your erosion is the loss of soil particles. Okay, so then there's all you have to do is multiply across with all these factors, and the R factor is erosivity. A K factor is erodibility. LS factor is the length and steepness of the sites at the slopes at the site. Okay, and then you have the cover and other practices, the P factor. So I always put practices first because it's P, right? And anyway, the with these, you can see the R in erosivity. If we call it rainfall erosivity, it helps you remember the R factor better. I don't know how to remember the K factor's erodibility, but that's the only outlier really, because the LS is length, steepness, C is cover, and P is practices, right? So you might be able to remember all those, but that's not really important because the app does that for you. The application will do that. But since the R factor is based on schedule as well as the local rainfall, historical rainfall, it's annual. You can look it up on a map, and it shows you some contours of the isopleth map, so that you can see, you know, what is it on an annual basis for different areas. And in California, when you get up in the mountains, the numbers go up, and when you go down in the desert, it goes down low, you know. And so up in the Northwest, you know, where it rains more, that's a higher R factor. So the permit in California actually says there's a waiver if your R factor is less than 5. In other words, if you're doing your work outside the rainy season for those 3 months, probably like June, July, August, maybe even September, 4 months or something, you can keep your R factor down pretty low. As soon as you get in a day or even two in the rainy season, the R factor seems to pop up. So you can't go into the rainy season to keep your R factor down. So anyway, um, the the thing about the annual though R factor is that it's the same uh, before and after construction. It's an annual number for so as far as comparing pre and post construction, we're not gonna uh, we're not going to rely on the R factor. I mean, it's not a big factor. We're going to include it so that we get realistic calculated erosion. But it's not a, it's not a deal breaker in here. During construction, when you're calculating erosion, when you do that in Russell 2, by the way, that might be the one thing that Russell 2 has over Russell on its own. Okay, so remember our application is RUSLE, and the Russell 2 is a computer program that's copyright and all that. All right, anyway, so Russell 2 can calculate we could probably make that work in this application too. But all we're doing here is comparing two things, before and after construction right now. So for this one, the R factor doesn't come into play for very much. Now the K factor, uh, something missing here. I mixed up the K, somehow the K factor is missing here. So this is the LS factor. So K factor is actually the erodibility, and it's the soil uh, characteristics. If you have clay, the clay sticks together. If you have sand and gravel, it falls out really quick out of solution. So the real mobile thing is silt. And so the K factor is really the highest, or the silt content. It depends on the silt. And in California, it's between like 0.26 and zero point 0.4, something like that. And so it's not a huge player, but if you had fill on your site, or you did a grading and got rid of one layer of soil, that it could have a slight change in the K factor before and after construction. So we'll definitely include the K factor. And then the LS factor is the length and steepness of slopes, like it says here. So remember, this slide has a typo in it, and we're talking about K factor first, and then the LS factor is actually the length of slopes. And there's a table form that they have in the permit that does that. You plug in your length and your steepness, and it gives you a factor. And anyway, we use that same table from the permit in the application. K factor, you're going to have to plug in. I always suggest you just use the Smarts application and put your location in and use that. Most of us are probably going to keep the K factor the same before and after construction, unless, like I said, unless there's a major change. And then you could use site-specific sieve analysis for your particle size to figure out if you're changing your K factor or not. All right. The C factor is your cover factor. Now, I wanted to point out that, before construction, this can be weeds, it could be plants, trees, pavement, but after construction, it could be seeds, it could be hydromulch, it could be hydro seed, any any cover, anything that's actually covering the soil. So before construction, you might have some plants, weeds, whatever out there, or even paved surfaces that you're removing. And so you have to include those pre-construction uh, uh, practices, or I'll call them practices, whatever you want to use that term. We'll look at what the app calls it. Some people criticize the naming in the application, but I kind of like it just because it works. All right. So anyway, C factors. My research has shown that these are not all that applicable or available. I'm sorry. You ask somebody what the C factor is for their product, and they haven't done a study or something. So we included some that we could get, and I hope, and maybe folks are giving us more C factors for their products. But I'll show you some guidance that I used, and but if we get a reference for a uh, C factor for a product, some kind of spray, some kind of cover, some kind of blanket, any of those best management practices that we might consider for post-construction, even compost and other ones. There should be a C factor that's associated with these, or we have to we'll work on estimating it unless somebody's done some research on an actual project. Okay. But if you have any references, we're going to see that you can actually use those references in the app. And if the application um, checks out the app and it's appropriate, that they will add those to the app. And so the app will become better over time as people use it if they add references for products that have a C factor. So this is kind of what we had to use. So um, straw fiber, let's look at netting, straw fiber with netting, tackifier binder. So there you can see the reported C factors and the references that they gave us. These are not for actual products, maybe. We'll see though. For uh, applying soil bonding agents, anionic form of polyacrylamide, we'll see we actually have a study by a specific product, and we use that reference uh, in the application. But there's very few where we actually have specific products that. I still think it would be a great idea if we could add more products, specific products, maybe even trademark products with C factors. Been telling people I'm doing this, and I haven't none of these manufacturers have sent to me any C factors yet. So anyway, you can see though that a lot of these, if for a vegetative surface cover, 75 to 96%, the C factor is less than 0.05. Well, you can see they even for sod they said it's less than 0.05. So I can see where some of these things, until they're mature, maybe this isn't the case. But man, that's going to be hard to match on some of these, unless I guess they do a, a study on their own product, right? Some of the erosion control blankets are less than zero point 0.1. You could see anyway. This was a good. I thought this was a pretty good uh, reference. I can share my references with you too, but I think they're any of the ones I used are already included in the application, as we'll see. And then we have the P factor, which are practices uh, such as the track walking, fiber rolls left after construction. So um, references for P factors are pretty hard to find too. But at least if you selected or put in an estimate, the water board would actually see your estimate. They would see that you don't have a reference, but they could still buy it. I mean, that's the power of this application, as we're going to see here in a minute. Oh, here the LS factor was just out of order. I'm sorry, this is the K factor. Oh yeah. So I mixed up K and LS in this presentation. My bad. So anyway, the we've already gone through that, so I don't want to do that anymore. So as part of the notice of termination, to get out of permit coverage, we we have to submit something that shows member 70% coverage, or we have to compare before and after construction. And so well, all we had to do is show that we're equal to or less than um, the pre-construction. And so we were able to we didn't use this app, but we used RUSLE for a very steep area going from Hemet to Beaumont along the 60 Caltrans project. The slopes were 1-to-1, and they wanted to expand the freeway. So they dug in more to those 1-to-1 slopes. Well, they still had 1-to-1 slopes. How did they get out of this? How did they show they were less than pre or um, erosion was equal to or less than pre-construction? Well, what they did was when they dug into these 1-to-1 slopes this time, they because those had been there for years the previous time. So when they dug into these slopes, they did an aerial uh, kind of drone thing footage through the whole canyon, and then they did it again after. But what they did was they broke the slopes up, put concrete lined ditches every 40 feet. So that would be the LS factor, right? So they were able to show that even though they had the same deepness of slopes, that the length of the slopes got shorter, only 40 foot. They limited to 40-foot lengths basically, which is pretty good erosion control, it turns out. All right. So anyway, we were able to use this RUSLE instead of RUSLE 2 to show that, and they bought it. And so that instead of using this application, though, I just wanted to show you that you can still use RUSLE and get it approved by the water board. So this application should work. So here it is. If you want to follow me, I'm going to go on line myself and show you the application. So it's all based on percentages. So before construction, you might have a percentage that's paved, and that percentage would have an R, overall R probably because before construction. Um, you would have a probably a one K factor before construction that I'm not even going to bother with the K factor because it's rare that it changes before and after, but it could, and this application will work with that. But sometimes the length and steepness of slopes does change. And so the factors for that would change. And so we have a way of doing that in the application, as you'll see. The main thing that I think that changes before and after construction is the coverings. So we call it segments here, but the segment coverings. Okay, before construction, you might have had 50% pavement. Maybe it was a asphalt lot and then 50% weeds. Okay, and we actually found a reference for weed cover and got some C factors for that. Okay, so we'll see how that might work. And then as far as best management practices, I couldn't really find a whole lot for P. So a lot of times we leave the P factor at 1, but on some projects, if you're leaving like um, fiber rolls or something in place, maybe you can get credit for some of that. The Anyway, so we are using the Russell equation, and then the instructions say, click on my projects or your projects. Okay, enter the new project by clicking on create a new project. Okay, and or there are two project states currently before and after construction. So you select or name the state and when then enter the acreage. So we would say pre-construction, how much acreage, and so on. And so we'll see how this works in a minute. We should add descriptions of the segment, and then you select cover BMPs from the drop down, and then you select the key factors from the drop down. So once you save the project, you can bring it back up again, and it'll tell you whether you equal or are less than pre-construction, and it will say passing. So let's take a look at one of my example projects. Okay, test one. So for this one, this project is passing because it says that only there was a 0.045 tons per acre per year. And then after construction, it was the 0.001 tons per acre per year. Okay, so for this site, and you should attach a site map. There's a place where you can attach a site map to this because you got to look on a site map where these are for the notice of termination. It's not like you're going to submit this though. We're going to see how you can just print this out, this form out, and then attach a site map and photos to go with your notice of termination. All right, so how did they come up with this 0.045 tons per acre before construction? Well, before construction, they had an R factor, and you'll see that this is going to be the same before and after. They had an R factor of 34.25, and same with after construction. So we named it before and after construction. Okay. And so we had the east side area and the west side area. So let's take a look at these. So for the east side area, we could have added a description, but it was mostly weeds with little lateral networks or undecayed residues, about 80% cover. And so the C factor assigned was 0.043 for that situation. but it was 100% covered. Well, 100% of 80% cover, right? Okay, so anyway, that's how they describe the in our reference. That's how they describe the C factor. And so we call the segment BMP also before construction was terracing, and it had a C factor of 0.7. So we have the east side was 50% of the 10 acres, so it was 5 acres. All right. And then it was the K factor was 0.32, and the slope length and steepness was a 5% slope with a 500 foot length. Okay, so that was the east side, and then the west side, it was tall weeds or short brush, average 20 inches high, 80% cover with a C factor of 0.038. So the name was of the segment BMPs was loose, no practices for P, and the it had a C factor of one. P. It should have said P factor here, but you get the idea. Anyway, then same thing. They had the exact same parameter. So half and half of the site, basically, it was covered with weeds beforehand. All right. What happened after construction? So, well, we had one area was paved. So how much was paved? Um, Half the site got paved, and this was just a simple one. Pavement, the C factor was 0.001, and the other part was actually earth guard fiber matrix that also had a C factor of 0.001. Earth guard fiber matrix is a stabilizer with some fiber in it. It relies mostly on the polyacrylamide and a little bit on the fibers. So it's a thinner application of fibers. But regardless, you can see how this is what would print out for your project before and after to document your what you did. So anyway, that's one of the examples. The um, test two, we had another one where it was a little closer call. In fact, it said it was failing because before construction they had 0.056, and after construction you had 0.065. And so what happened afterwards is uh, they used in this case they had a lot of pavement before construction, um, and the weed cover had a pretty good C factor as well. So after construction, they used earth guard and gravel. And the gravel, we could only get a C factor of 0.05, and the earth guard, 0.001, sorry. So, what, I don't know, what are you going to do? So when you compare these things, you have to figure out how to make the 0.05 instead of 0.043. They're so close. So somebody said, why don't you just use rounding? But we're still a little bit off. And so what we could, I don't, we could do something to increase it, but it's probably pretty rare that you have a site this big, where your pavement or something is a little bit different. But to the competent gravel, I would have thought would have been better, numbering than this. But anyway, let's go on and see how a new project will work. Those are
John,
two examples.
John,
Yep.
before you do that, we have a few questions, and it might be a good time
Oh,
to
good.
answer some of
Sure.
those.
Uh-huh.
So I'm seeing a few questions about how is this compared to Russell 2? Is this used in lieu of Russell 2? Um, in the construction general permit, the new construction general permit, especially in attachment H for TMDLs, they require the use of Russell 2.
Mhm.
Can this be used in lieu of that? What's your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, no, this is not for the TMDLs. Frankly, I commented on that and told them that, hey, you should have something that works before you spec it out. And they keep telling us, the water board keeps telling us, oh yeah, we're gonna get Russell because Caltrans is gonna fix Russell for us. And then you ask Caltrans and they say, oh, I don't know what they're talking about, you know. So this whole thing about Russell too, and being unstable and how they're going to fix it and all that, it hasn't come to fruition. For the water board to actually put that in and not give any other alternatives is kind of funny, but not going there. Yeah, they require Russell too. This is not Russell too. This is Russell. This is only for pre and post construction comparison for a notice of termination. So if
Okay.
you are required to use Russell 2, you would have to use Russell 2.
Okay, and so this is essentially what some might call Russell one, or just the Russell equation, and that's used for risk determination, but it's all which is on smarts, but
Mhm.
it's more specifically going to be used for notices of termination, which brings up
Yes.
another point. Many regional boards are requiring photos regardless of which demonstration you choose.
Oh yes, we're coming to that. So
Okay,
the this is just the part where you do um your calculations, okay? And then we're also going to tell you, yes, you need to get your site map that show these same percentages that we're calling out here. So, you know, you say I got 50% or 5 acres paved, you need a map that matches that. So
okay.
all that goes together still, and we're coming to that part. But this part, at least it gives you a simple, presentable way of showing your percentages.
Okay,
So,
one more question from Peter. Can multiple cover and practice factors be included in this tool?
so yeah, so the tool allows you, if we create a new project, right? Okay, and we start naming it whatever date, and we put in all the factors, right? So we add segments. It's kind of unlimited on the segments, but the segments have to be um, some percent. So these they call them transects in the Russell 2. So you add a segment, you name the segment, and you say basically how many acres that segment is. And so this could be, um, I'm like on a Caltrans job, you know, the right at the bridge abutments, it's a 1 to 2 slope. Uh, so they would put in 1 to 2, and they would calculate, I don't know, so many acres based on the bridge abutments they have that are 1 to 2, and come up with the acreage for that, a total acreage for that. And so that would be one idea for a segment, you know, bridge abutments. And then you'd have to estimate the acreage and show a photo that matches that. Okay. The another example would be where we said we'll add another segment, and you'd say maybe paved roads. Okay, so and then that would just be so many acres again of the actual paved roads, and then you could keep adding segments. Well, what was the cover on your bridge abutment? So then we would add a segment cover, and we would go to the drop down menu. So the drop down menu has all these different soils. Bare soil would be one. Okay. So before I continue on all this, um, uh, did I answer the questions yet? Or
Yeah, I think
hmm,
we got most of them. One other from Katie talking about BFM. That would
mhm.
typically be a temporary BMP and not acceptable for NOT approval, correct? You would want something that would be considered permanent stabilization.
Never discount the power of the water board to accept um, BMPs as equivalent. So when it says equivalent, as long as you can maintain it for 4 or 5 years, it could be considered equivalent. So, it's not really up to me to make that one. So, and then I put things in here because I actually had a reference
Okay.
for BFM. So yeah, if they had BFM, but they put seed in it, you could see how that would still work. But you'd get a better um, C factor for the BFM than you would the hydro seed. One of the things that I think we're trying to work on here would be like a combination of best management practices, because what we saw in the field was that uh, they used jute net and then they sprayed hydro seed over the jute net. And how do you account for that? So a combination hasn't been done yet, but you could um, you could put that in. Um, I'll show you how to do that, where you can actually add your own to this. And then you can estimate the C factor and put that in. So that's kind of the power of this. And then if you had a reference for it as well, that would even be better. So we did get some references here. We had they're listed, the ones that we did find. Some of our references were just general, competent gravel cover, the .05. We couldn't find a really good reference for it, but we wanted to put it in here. Some of these others we did have, like the EarthGuard fiber matrix reference. And so the ones that we found references for, they're right. The references are available and they're here in the app, and so we put them in. But like for the bridge cover, we would probably have to add a new one because we couldn't find one here for a rock mattress or the Caltrans usually calls out for their BMPs, or they call it rock slope protection or something to that effect. So when that's the case, we can't actually uh, let's see. So we keep adding covers. Let me see how this works here. Oh yeah, you do the drop down. All right. So the add function. So we did have some of the pre-construction situations where there was weeds, and there's looks like they're still adding some of these in here. Which one did they call? Okay, empirical competent gravel was an empirical estimate. So anyway, I guess that's what JuteNet was too. They don't have we don't have a a goal for that yet. So anyway, then you would add in the next project state, which would just be after construction, and do the comparison again. And so all these they're all what do you call it? Percentages of percentage. So if for a certain segment the K factor was different, you could account for that by plugging in a different K factor for that segment, or segments that had that K factor. If you had different length and steepness for the bridge abutments, they were maybe they were uh, uh, say 40. It has to be greater than one. So 40 length, and the steepness was 150% slope. So you would put that in, and how many acres? Maybe as a whole site, it might only have been, 0.5 acres. So you end up, it's all a percentages of a percentage. And so you put in so many acres, and it calculates based on those acreage. There's one K factor for that before construction, because each one of your segments is a percentage as well. and then you'd have the percentage of the uh, LS factor. So it would calculate the LS factor based on the length, steepness of this zero point 0.5 acres. And so the zero point 0.5 acres would be a percent of the whole, which I mean, it could have been 10 acres for the entire project. And so, and then you would show these segments on your site map, and so the next thing, you can save it, okay, and then you can print it. So we go back to go. So if we, oh, I think it still says it, but it does say print. So you know what? I can print this one to PDF now, because it says I'm passing, and we changed it because the PDF version that we had before. Here we go. Let's try that. So it prints out the whole thing. So it's very uh, that's just it. But this is like somebody mentioned. This is only partially the way there. This is just a good way of plugging in all the different segments for the different pre and post, and then matching it to the sitemap, right? So really, that takes us back then. Um, the other NOT requirements. So the most important is maintenance and operations plan. So we found that the water board doesn't like Russell 2 or Russell 1 without a proper maintenance and operation plan. So you submit them a 5-year plan, because these calculations rely on the BMP implementation and maintenance. And so they expect these things to be maintained, or you're not going to meet that erosion control requirement that you're calling out. So your erosion is going to, if you're not installed the way it says, that's why the photos are necessary. You show, hey, we sprayed this area, this place is paved, this place is planted, whatever you said, your photos need to represent that. And then in the new construction general permit, it's very detailed on how your site map and your photos have to be taken to show this. And so this is just a part of the notice of termination requirement. This is just the calculations for your best management practices. And so the other requirements, you got to you got to be done with construction and remove all the materials and equipment, and all those things still have to be done. This part is just the we're just trying to get the calculations done and demonstrate that your post-construction is equal to or less than pre-construction. So I still I could swear that we did have a a way of adding the BMPs. I'm sorry, but our actual Ryan Bonomo, you're not on, are you? I don't think you got on. The guy who developed this, actually, I'm presenting it, but he was the real application manager, or put it together, and he's the one who fixes all the things that we found, and we had plenty of comments and we fixed them all. But I still don't see how we add the BMPs here with the references for the um, for the project. So we're working on that. But other than that, that was really my demo for today. Any
Okay.
other questions?
Yeah, we have a couple questions. One question here, how would you calculate for a site that uses wattles and RESCs?
So you would have to put that one in. That's what I'm saying, is that when we put in this covering, okay, and the P factor, okay, you're supposed to be able to add in your own. And right now, I don't see a way of putting that in. We were supposed to be able to, maybe if I just type it in. So what did it say? The RSC was RECP, right?
Yes.
But you don't have a specific kind. We'll try the RSCP, see what happens. Does it let us? No. It's because it says percentage too. So you're really supposed to say, let's go 50%, and then you're picking a BMP here. Um, so that is seems to be the issue right now is that we don't have a way of putting in the 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 new BMPs like we should. Um, I thought that we had, but I can't see how to do it. So um, I
Okay.
might,
We have
but
another
yes,
question. Another question, and someone brings up another point. A good point is another place where Russell 2 needs to be used in the construction general permit or the 2022 CGP is with the new surface water buffer requirements. So not only do you have to do it for NOTs, but if you're going to have less than 50 feet, you need to quantify the benefit you're receiving from your BMPs as opposed to
it has to
all
be
or portion.
uh, it has to be equivalent. So Um, I don't think the construction general permit says you have to use Russell for that one. They give you options. I'm working on a project right now where we're using the EPA guidance for that. It came from the EPA permit, that requirement for the buffer. And so if you contact me, I can send you that. But it's right there in Appendix F of the 2022 federal construction general permit. And in there, if you can't maintain 50 feet, if you can go anywhere in between, then you can do option two, which is the set perimeter barriers, and they tell you to calculate. But if you end up generally with a double row of silt fence 5 feet apart, and so if you started that as the worst case, you can move backwards from there. The other thing is if you can't maintain any of the 50-foot buffer, you have to do the two silt fences 5 feet apart, and you have to restabilize that area when you're done within 7 days. And so the guidance doesn't seem to require or the actual permit doesn't seem to require Russell, but yes, Russell 2 could be a way of comparing that. What I found is Russell 2 is good for uh, estimating erosion, but the when they're talking about the buffers, they're talking about sediment trapping. And I don't know, they keep saying like Russell 2 can do that, but it hasn't, I don't think I've seen it shown or demonstrated to my knowledge.
Okay. Well, we still got a few minutes, and I know there were a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to give people an opportunity if you'd like to unmute and field a question directly to John. You feel free to do so right now.
Well, if I can, I'm still, asking about multiple BMPs on the same segment and how we combine them. And I see that you have, a ability to add segment covering, segment BMPs, multiple in the same segment. But I'm wondering mathematically, how does that work out? If I've got one
Yeah.
silt vent and I get 20% reduction, and then I've got another silt vent that gives me 20% reduction, have I achieved a 40% reduction?
Yeah,
Or
so you'll see that this is not based on sediment controls at all. So like a silt fence or anything. So for the covers though, you just put in percentages. Now, if you wanted to claim some sediment controls, you could put things in here as practices with a number, and you would just have to estimate it because I do not have I could not find any P factors for silt fence, say, or fiber rolls for that matter. So if you could find a reference for it, great. Otherwise, if you wanted to put something in here, you could do that, but then you'd have to sell that to the water board. So if you had 30%, I don't know, if you said silt fence, right? And then, but I don't think my thing will take it right now. It'll do fiber rolls or something, and then maybe 70% of benching or um, let's see, what's another one they had? Uh, yeah, we'll try benching. All right. Anyway, that would work. And then you could do you could pick any of these. You could put straw, you could pick the BFM, paved area as 37. You can put as many coverings for a segment as you want. And those are just percentage based as well. So it's all percentage based. Well, what if I have a slightly different? Well, you just have to add another segment if it changes. If any of these things change, you just add another segment, and you come up with a estimate for that segment. So, whatever acreage this represents, you plug it in. Two, this one might be three, and you can just keep adding segments. And what it's going to do is for this 2 acres, it's going to do a percentage of that percentage, but it's all going to add up to before construction, one number at the end. And the same thing with post construction, it'll come up with one number at the end. Does that help? So you could put silt fence in here. But the addition is somehow it's missing here right now. It was working earlier, and I can't figure out how to get the blank one to come up that you can put in with a reference. So.
Okay, but I'm wondering, like, even just doing it by hand using the RUSLE equation, I've got multiple practices with various degrees of protection. And so if I get, 30% reduction from this and I get 40% reduction from that, do I have a 70% reduction, or would I multiply 0.3 times 0.4 or something like that? So that's what I'm
Oh, no, yes, absolutely. So I know I get you now. So you would get 0.8%, 0.8. Okay, so you get 20, basically 20% reduction for this 30%. So it would be this percent of this percent. So your factor times a percent times the acres. So then you would that all becomes part of the total percent. So yes, I think what you said is it a percent of a percent? And absolutely. Okay, so you have 2 acres, you have 50% that's this and this and this, and that's one factor. That's going to get your C factor for 2 acres, which is a percent of the whole, which might be 10 acres, right? And then it all adds up to the top. When you figure it out, you have to, before it will accept your project, you'll have to enter enough acres that add up to 10. So for this one, if that was 2 and 3, this would have to be 5 because it's got to add up to 10. Well, we can make that 10.7, you know what I mean? And then make this whatever your things were, 2.7 or so on. Whatever it is, that's a percent of the whole. And so you're going to describe your segments, and they're going to have percent covers and percent segment BMPs, and all that adds up to an overall C factor or P factor or R factor, K factor, LS factor for before construction. And then you compare that to after construction.
All right.
Okay,
Well, we're just about out of time, though. So, John, could you put up on the last slide your contact information? Because it sounds like there's a lot of people that'd like to talk to you. So,
Absolutely. And yeah, feel free to contact me anytime. I do have contact with Ryan. He couldn't be on today, but I will be letting him know, that there was interest in this program and that we need to be able to add those BMPs again. So it was there. I'm not sure how that disappeared, but you will be able to add your own BMPs with numbers in there.
Okay. And if you would give us a copy of your notes, a PDF, we'll upload those onto the Stormwater Awareness Week website. So thank you, everyone. We got a great program tomorrow. This was the last one for today. If you missed any of them, most of them are already available online. But we'll see you tomorrow, and have a good evening.